Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Gunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvinavaditamastu Mavid Vishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Peace, peace, peace. And thank you for joining us. We're reading from the complete works of Swami Abhedananda in the last chapter of the lectures that were collected into a group called True Psychology. And we are about 2/3 of the way through that final lecture. If you're following along in a book, it's on page 586. Space.
So how do we go up to 581? Oh, here it is, of course. It must be starting at the beginning. I, for some reason, have never felt the power of that opening chant quite so much as tonight, because it seems to me the whole thing is of a solid piece, like a solid rock. Give us strength and right understanding. Think of that in times like this, like these, and may love and harmony. This all kind of says it all, doesn't it? All right, Swami, I'm sort of on the right page. We say in the hymn book. Where did you want to start? Space?
Yes.
Would somebody please tell Swami where we are? He asked. He said he'd like to know where we are. what used to be called 1946 Vedanta Place in Hollywood, California.
Yes.
The home where all of the Vedanta societies started, because the sister, one of three, that hosted Swami Vivekananda in 1900, as the year came on, in South Pasadena, moved here in the next 29 years sometime and invited the Swami who came to found the work here. So now do we know more or less where we are? You asked. All right, good.
Okay, he just finished talking. In the previous paragraph, he was talking about time, and now we're going to talk about space. Space will not exist either, because space means the coexistence. When two ideas rise simultaneously, that which separates them is what we call space. For instance, suppose you are looking at the sun from the earth. If you think of yourself and the sun at the same time, that which intervenes between and keeps apart these two ideas is space. So time and space are the conditions under which all phenomena can exist. They are the forms of the sensibility or the appearances, or as Kant says, the forms of intuition. Now there's an extensive footnote about Kant here. Guess we'll go ahead and read that.
I'd like to, yes. Let's learn something.
Kant says in his Critique of Pure Reason, quote, "Space is therefore regarded as a condition of the possibility of phenomenon, not as a determination produced by them. It is a representation a priori, which necessarily precedes all external phenomena." And about time, he says, "Time is, therefore, simply a subjective condition of our human intuition, which is always sensuous, that is, so far as we are affected by objects, but by itself, apart from the subject, nothing." This was from Max Muller's translation, page 19 and 28. So space and time are regarded by Kant as the forms of appearance as well as content of pure intuition. Quote again, "As forms of all appearances, space and time are known to be necessary and universal. Hence we may say that our ideas of space and time are a priori or pure. They cannot be dependent on experience or sense perception, which can never give us strict universality or necessity. This implies further
Now,
that
that goes to a double
oh,
asterisk, but I don't see, is there some place here that we have, okay, brother.
yeah,
let's
I don't
continue.
know. This implies further that the content of our ideas, namely space and time, themselves are due to the nature of our sensibility. They are forms under which alone we can sense appearances and are necessarily imposed on appearances by the nature of our sensibility. This doctrine is expressed in the statement that space and time are forms of sensibility. And that's from Professor Patton's in his book, Kant's Metaphysics of Experience, Volume 1, page 102. And of course, what he's getting at here is that they are simply fundamental aspects of Maya. Maya is composed of space, time, and causation. So, and as John Dobson used to say, space and time are like a pair of opposites. We see things away from us in space because we see them backwards in time. And so it's a fundamental way in which the absolute, the oneness, in which there is no dividedness and no separateness and no change. It's the way we misperceive the absolute. We misperceive it in space and time by seeing it away from us in space and backward in time.
Well, now, Swami, I don't know how much time we're going to be able to give this, but I want to say that...
How much space you
Yeah, well, yeah, the spaces between the ears. You know, I went to the doctor the other day, and he looked through from here to here and didn't find nothing. No, that's just his story. But here's the deal. A good deal of Western philosophy, from the standpoint, you know, we all have a standpoint in time and space, if you will, from which we're looking out at the world as we sort of think sometimes. And that conditions the way we think about what we see out there, because we're seeing it from an angle of perception, which really is a perspective. And you have a different one, and everybody has a different angle of perception, but we usually don't take that into consideration when we're thinking about anything, being in the same room or having an idea about something. So I'm suggesting that this gnarly paragraph, or the whole discussion of Kant, is a big rock in the road. I'm talking about a big rock in the road in Western philosophy. And from this little fellow, the least of these your brethren, point of view, German philosophy is a large, difficult to pronounce, and somewhat difficult to imagine and think of way of looking at the world from that angle of perception. Those of us who come in the United States often, particularly I suggest perhaps in some of the philosophy departments, through the English world, which is a bit lighter and a little bit more common sense maybe, which has to be overcome, like the sun's rising. The whole of human life is really overcoming common sense, in a sense. The sun comes up in the morning. And yet our founding Swami used to say there's nothing more uncommon in the world than common sense. So what I'm saying is that perhaps the very words of the English philosophers are easier to understand. And it may or may not have been one's path through all of this garden and the flowers and the weeds, that we have had more exposure to English philosophy, believe it or not. We won't do that tonight, sometimes we do. But John Locke, who opened the window of modernity in some rather specific ways to the sunlight of modern thinking, he wrote the Constitution of the United States. What he actually did was he wrote part of the Constitution of the colony of North Carolina, and all of the founding fathers, so-called, were steeped in John Locke, who said that the back of your head, if you remember, is where everything is thought through, and the sense impressions are kind of evaluated and compared and discerned. Oh, yeah, that's a so-and-so and that and whatnot. And that's where the color is, and therefore democracy is the only understandable way of men governing themselves. The Declaration of Independence of John Locke, and that no church leader and no government has the right to tell a free woman, a free man what to think. Ultimately, it's your own inner experience that's the final criterion. Validity and science and spirituality. Now, that's John Locke. And here Kant has an idea that time and space, if you will, are modes of perception. This is my reading. You have yours. Please evaluate it yourselves, and we might have a discussion about it. Ping pong. I call it spiritual Wimbledon sometimes. He says it's existent before we open our eyes in the morning. He says we come with this ingrained in our brain, if you will, as babes before we even open our eyes on the world. That's what a priori means. It means beforehand. Modes of perception. Almost as if they were places or spaces and times and compartments in the world of awareness that pre-exist the content therein. Now, you can't get this big stone out of the road because he's still there, at least among those that still think about philosophy. And this was the first thing we studied, just maybe time and coincidence, in divinity school, was Kant's Critique of Pure Reason under a wonderful man named Bernard Loomer, who happened to be Larry Greenfield's thesis director, the former recent executive director of the Part of the World's Religions, and some other people that we really appreciate. He was our dean. Are they really a priori? The modern approach, perhaps since those sunshine days in which modern philosophy, even Thomas Hobbes wasn't modern philosophy, opening its windows and doors to sunshine and democracy, John Locke, they look at it just the other way around. They say there is nothing a priori. There, before anything else gets started, an inclination, an adducement, a mode of perception, a way, a compartment of thinking, space and time, that precedes any content. Quite the contrary, they say everything is a posteriori. Everything that we think about the world that we see is after the fact. And our beloved John Dobson, who was deep into astrophysics, he studied under Lawrence of Lawrence Livermore Labs. Swami Ashokananda wanted him to go back to school. You won't believe this, you won't comprehend it. In 1934, to the only University of California there was at that time, in Berkeley, he studied under Lawrence, who gave him foundational physics, fundamental thoughts about what the nature of what we think of, at least in those days, as reality, the proton, the electron, neutron, what the very foundation of the experiential realities are. And at that level, it's experience of the senses plus the mind plus the microscope, everything. Everything is a posteriori. Even seeing your fingernail, John would love to point out, we are looking at it in the past because it took light, an infinitesimal fraction of it, travels 186,000 miles in a second. So supposing that your finger is perhaps 2.5 feet from your face, still it's a small increment of time. What is a priori? The only thing the modern world of physics, as I say, particularly coming through perhaps the English, you've got the Germans, you've got the English, you've got the Indians, Buddhists, the only thing that is a priori is a statement like 2 plus 2 equals 4. It's what's called a tautology because it says the same thing on the left side, your side, the left side, as it does on the right with the equal sign. 2 plus 2 adds nothing more to the universe than does 4, excepting perhaps a little psychological insight. So the only thing, according to modern science, the philosophy of science, the modern world coming to the English, as my view, is the idea there is no a priori. Nothing before the fact. like the predisposition of the mind to see things in categories of time and space which are already part of your brain equipment before you're born, or at the moment you're born, before you even open your eyes. Remember the story about the puppies? I'm not going to get away with this one. That little boy passing the puppies to a good home, little boy. And the man looked at it and said, oh, puppies, what kind of puppies are those? And he said, I'll tell you the other way. Could be either way. He said, they're Presbyterian puppies. So he comes back a couple of weeks later, and all the puppies are still there. He said, oh, I see you still got, yeah, I said, what to do. He said, now tell me, I want to remember, what kind of puppies did you say there were last week, a couple of weeks ago? What kind of puppies are these? He said, they're Episcopalian puppies. He said, oh, I said, no, wait a minute, you can't do that to me. I remember now, last week you said they're Presbyterian puppies. He said they have their eyes open now. Now you can start up with Episcopalian puppies. The only thing that we have to work with is not a predestined category of time and space. Oh, Isaac Newton thought it was. So space was real out there. And time is real out there. Kind of almost absolutely, kind of like, it's everything else takes place inside that. But my conditioning through the English school, ending up in Alfred North Whitehead, and this is what his student gave me to understand. Not that everybody agrees, but look at it this way. You got 3 salt shakers in a table, and you start moving them out from each other in a triangle, and you move them further and further. There are relationships between those 3 salt shakers, right? Gravity, for example. There are definite relations. The further you move them out, the more space you have. Because what space is are the vectors. That's a Whiteheadian term. Paul Weiss was considered his leading metaphysical student. I adored him, from New York. He's just adorable. And he was a little easier to understand even than Whitehead in the words, although he loved his philosophy of faith. You see, the further you move them out, the more space you have. So that's what's happening in the universe. The stars are expanding. And every day you got more space. And even St. Augustine, the great mystic, half of his work at least was mystical from the Greek Plotinus thinking, Plato, if you will, thought that space and time were definitely conditional, that they did not exist before the creation of the universe. So I'll leave it for you to decide. But exactly opposite to what Kant is saying here is what I believe you would find in the last textbooks that were written before the philosophy departments chucked out metaphysics from their teaching in the middle of the last century. I think a young woman, a young man, would be well supported to ask for her and his money back, having studied philosophy for 4 years, because they don't teach philosophy. They don't teach metaphysics. We do. Process theologians do. And in the religion department, they threw the baby out with the bath. Now, isn't that fun? You have to make up your own mind. But absolutely what the Swami says is the Vedanta party line. We try to say it's all based on experience of wiser men than I, surely. That's everybody in the room plus people. But nevertheless, it's worth thinking about. Time, space, and causation are considered the very stuff, the warp and woof of Maya, which is, among other things, the universe as we think we see it. And just like Raja and Real and Royal, all the words from the old Indo-European grandmother tongue, Sanskrit being one of them, mean royal, so Maya and magic are the same word. We live in a universe that's part make-believe and part real. But the reality is the shining infinity of Brahman. And everything else, including this discussion, is something else. Anyway, I have a great time with, I got to tell you this one, this is the end of it. I walked, when I was at Swamiji House in South Pasadena for some 13 years, along a railroad track, I like to say, with the barley, wild barley shining backlit, the waves of, shining grain, amber waves of grain. And at the end, I found this shoemaker with a smile. He was one of the founders of the Shoemakers Union. His name was Harry Goldfarb. His spiritual name or pen name was Zalman der Schuster, Solomon the philosophical, mystical shoe cobbler. And his wife was sitting there one day laughing up a storm, reading a paper in Yiddish, which says the late 1800s had been full of science for the arriving community that came over in that wave, into America and so forth. What was she laughing about? She said, a young man from Columbia University is suing Columbia because they didn't teach him anything. Okay, so I'm going to try to be good.
All right. Before we get too spaced out here, yes, and see if we can cobble a few more things together here. All right, so they are the forms of the sensibility or the appearances, or as Kant says, the forms of intuition. But when we go toward the absolute, we realize that in the realm of the absolute, there is no phenomenon.
Phenomenon meaning sense experience.
There is no time, no space, and consequently, no law of causation does work there, because these are the conditions of the relative world. We must know that we are living in the relative world, and everything that we perceive with our senses has a relative or conditional existence. But that which is unconditional is beyond the relative existence.
Unconditioned, Swami. It's a small point.
Unconditioned. That which is unconditioned is beyond the relative existence and is the absolute. Take, for instance, the conception of a creator. Can he be the absolute? No. He is relative, because a creator requires to be related to the creation. If creation is taken away from him, he is no longer the creator. It is a name which is related to the created object, and that relation which makes a creator what he is. And that relation makes a creator what he is. So the creator of the universe, or God, is not the absolute being or the non-different Brahman. The creator is relative. He is a part of the phenomena, and therefore he is the firstborn Lord of the universe. He is the firstborn Lord means he is the first manifestation of the absolute Brahman. Footnote. The firstborn Lord, or God, is the first manifestation of the absolute pure Brahman. According to Vedanta, the pure absolute is the supratemporal and supraspatial reality, and it transcends the categories of time, space, and causation. It is called the fourth, or Turiya, in relation to the other three, Ishvara, Hiranyagarbha, and Virata. Ishvara is also called the Vyakta, which is Prakriti and Prajna. The Avyakta is the state of Shushupti. It is the unmodified, undifferentiated, and unmanifested cause of the projection of the phenomenal appearance. The causal nascence lies in Ishvara, or Avyakta, in a dormant state. Ishvara's wills are to be many, and his divine will or contemplation becomes crystallized into the phenomenal world.
Swami, would you like me to sign you up for an appointment with the periodontist?
No.
The man with braces? That's a mouthful.
I've just a few more lines here, and we'll finish this paragraph. The Absolute projects out of its own body the firstborn Lord, or Ishvara, and projects this cosmic consciousness, or the cosmic ego, which becomes the creator, the prime mover of evolution. Matter again comes out of the same Absolute. Okay, my friends, this is really a lot of stuff, and I would suggest that we not get too tangled up with the terminology that could become familiar after a while. But don't you see, we're talking simply speaking about the absolute, the capital A. So, of course, the very title of this chapter, I picked it up at the beginning, is kind of like a non sequitur, doesn't follow.
one of these contradictions in terms. Our relation to the absolute. There can be no relation to the absolute. The absolute is everything. It's one. Because there's no plurality, there are no relations. Nevertheless, there is a relation, if you will, when he says the creator, capital C, is relative. So the firstborn, if you will, of the universe is some kind of a, Swami could help me, some kind of a manifestation or seeming attributes or whatever at a lower level of the oneness, the Advaita, meaning non-dual, I, meaning atypical, Dvaita, dual, Vedanta, the one absolute. Then comes the creator. Well, that's what they call Ishvara. That's a kind of a nice name. Howdy do. Mr. Ishvara, like Mr. Jones, meet the master, they used to say. And meet Jesus was the idea. All right. So the personal God is Ishvara, which among other things is the sum of all the subjective consciousness in the world, the plants, the animals, you, me, everybody, as they think of it. And from that comes all the rest, including time and space and causation. So we really don't need to worry about all these terms, but they would just so you understand the terms are not as scary as they say. Avyakta, A-V-Y-A-K-T-A, is the universe, if you will, if you like that kind of thought and terminology, when it's completely indrawn and there is no manifestation outside. That deep, deep place. I think it says where the alone is alone with the alone or something. But the Indian scriptures are just marvelous. Do you remember what it says? Something about before darkness was upon the waters, before there was anything. That's what the energy, all the things that we think about the relative plane become one. That's Savatya. And then when it starts to have a seeming appearance, in quotes, and the creator then has come into existence because the creator is creating, that's called Ishvara. Well, Swami, I think it's a lot to say. I'm kind of shivering, frankly, because it says the absolute projects out of its own body, as it were, the firstborn Lord, capital L or Ishvara, and projects this cosmic consciousness, or the cosmic ego, projects that, which becomes the creator, capital C, the prime mover of evolution. And then that last sentence again, it's a zinger, it's a home run. We used to go about this time of night as the summer goes on to watch the Dodger games at the stadium. He says, matter again comes out of the same absolute. And matter's in quotes all over the place. We've just discovered recently, right, that there is no such thing as rock, solid, hard matter. I love it because John Dobson had absorbed all this stuff from his friend, the man that, Lawrence, that gave us the Livermore Labs, that was deeply involved in everything else, space and rockets and everything. And John just saw these things so clearly. He reminded us of Einstein's wonderful phrase, speaking of that equation, in which mass, which you could say in parentheses matter, dropped out as a principle of physics in 1905. Now, kids, this is not appliqué. This is not like the makeup and the wig and whatever it may be that they put on in Hollywood before you go on. It's not like that for us. If we have a foundation science, particularly the Western Vedantas, it's astrophysics. Erwin Schrödinger, with a couple of dots over the O, smiley face, is considered a Vedantist, and he contributed fantastically to the alpha and omega of our common modern thinking, to quantum mechanics, and also really the father of microbiology. So Vedanta is right there with the understandings that ground this universe in a sound and light show, an entertainment show, in which is that the Swami was saying that we love to remember the light that you can see it quite often. The bright star Sirius, so bright that it's -1 magnitude. The light left, we'll say, 8 years ago, that falls on your retina tonight. So as he says, we see everything by the trick of thinking we're seeing it far away by virtue of the relationship between time and space. The light that left 8 years ago fell on your retina tonight if we go out and look. You're seeing the stars it was 8 years ago. The whole of the panoply of the night sky, what we can see and with telescopes more deeply, is a time machine. And you see it as it was 8 years ago by the trick of thinking of it as off in space. They're intimately related. That's why we call it space-time. You can't have one without the other. All right. Well, I'll try to stick with the text, because this to me is everything. The absolute, capital A, is everything. And yes, we paid our ticket and we're in the movie. As John Jobson used to say, I didn't come in at the beginning of the movie and I don't intend to stay till the end of the cosmos. But it's quite a show. And not only is it there partly for, I think, for the show itself, the entertainment fact, the Leela of God, but it's there to help us, the stepping stones of the poetry and the science and the beauty and the love and the relationship with animals and each other that is our whole lifetime's journey and adventure. The joy is to get back home to an awareness of the absolute, which all the time has been really all there is. The whole universe is a gigantic magnet. I used to talk to John about that. I said causation pulls, it doesn't push. It's a pulling magnet, pulling the absolute, calling us, wanting us to come back to these arms that are waiting to receive us. The whole universe is a gigantic magnet. In one pole is matter.
It's one pole.
It's one pole, thank you. And we're doing this for each other tonight, is matter. And the other pole is the mind, we'll say. Matter is the negative pole, all right, you can say that. And the mind is the positive pole of that magnet. And the neutral pole, let's see if he gets away with this in each of your minds, is the absolute Brahman, capital B-R-A-H-M-A-N, which is neither mind nor matter, yet is the cause of both. Well, that's it. That's it. Page 587. But even the term cause, in quotes, is a relative one. The term cause, in quotes, can be applied to a thing only when it is related to the effect, cause and effect. And I never thought of this. Swamiji thought of it, and he told me one day. Swami Vivekananda whispered in our ears. It goes cause, effect, cause, effect, cause, effect. The effect then becomes the cause of a new effect. Which came first, the chicken and the egg? Nobody talks about what came after the egg. Another chicken. So that's all related to this Maya, this magic, this entertainment show. So the causeless cause, they talk about the first cause. It's a big problem in Western philosophy. The causeless cause, or the uncaused cause, is an anomalous term. It does not refer to the absolute. It's not a chain in the effect, cause and effect. We've been here 100 times before, but it's so much fun. Remember the Native American Indians would go, oh boy, is Vedanta close to their whole view, and vice. It's part of the perennial philosophy, the eternal religion. And somebody said, well, tell me about the world. And what holds up the world? I get a huge kick, and you should do it too. Get binoculars the next time there's an eclipse of the moon, and put them up to your head, and you'll be just knocked off your socks, because it is a big sphere hanging there, hanging there in space, our brotherly neighbor. You can do it any night. You can do it when it's a full moon. Unsupported by anything. But this man said, what holds it up? He said, it's a turtle. Remember that one? Yeah. Fellow fought for a while and said, well, to the American Indian, what holds up the turtle? He says, a turtle, another turtle. He says, and that one? He says, it's turtles all the way down. Well, it isn't. That's what they say. So we've got the idea here is that this cause and effect, uncaused cause, does not refer to the absolute. Again, the absolute cannot be expressed by words. You're not finding a first cause here, as it is beyond speech and thought. And they give you the Sanskrit. I'm going to spare you, though. It's very beautiful because it means virtually nothing to most of us. Well, just the sound of it. Avan manso gocharam. But Swami Prabhupada was pretty keen. Everybody has his own angles, the founder here, in not having the Swamis from India, recent arrivals though they may be, go on endlessly in Sanskrit. Now, I admit that it sounds wonderful in the Bhagavad Gita class to hear the sonority and the words coming out before each verse, but generally speaking, Swami didn't need that. He thought it would get in the way of people's trying to understand and hang into the thought, stay with it. Both words and thoughts cannot reach the absolute. It is beyond our thought and beyond our conception. Now, here's one that's a winger I hope you understand. He says, so the personal God is not the absolute. And my dear friends, he is not saying there is no God. Now, obviously, this is one angle, one brand of candy bar, whatever. But it's not that. And I have to sometimes, when I get really excited by something that somebody said or some motherly thing that someone has done, I just run into the main Swami, the head Swami from India. And I say humorously, don't tell me there is no God. But don't you see he's saying God, G-O-D, and that's the wisdom, the wonderful quality of these early disciples of Sri Ramakrishna, the disciples of the disciples, the third generation that went around the world like the disciples of Christ. Well, the children of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna went all over the world, and they used the word God because that's the word that we use. And they didn't say there is no God, they amplified it, saying, well, we call it the absolute. We call it the one. India is so far from polytheism, you couldn't even believe it. The Westerners can't understand. We call it Brahman. As a matter of fact, we say with the Bible, my name is silence. So I just get, and this is no joke. I mean, this is kind of interesting. I'm not trying to be mean-spirited and tiny about this. But as Sandy Champion used to say, call over the intercom in the morning, one of our, acting members lived here. First thing I'd hear out of his intercom in the morning, it's all about God. Well, it is. And when Swami Prabhupada, this is pretty private stuff, when he experienced his highest level of consciousness, which is pretty high, called lower samadhi in India, just came upon him and somebody said, hold him. In English, those boys didn't speak all that much English. Ramakrishna had a few words for fun. He'd use them for effect. He heard the words, God. And maybe he heard the word God, God, God. And he was getting as close to the unitary experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi, Sarvakalpa Samadhi, as we're likely ever in one lifetime to get to see. Until we too are lost in that ultimate vision, that ultimate wonder, that ultimate oneness in which, again, a misunderstanding. Sir Edward Arnold, The Light of Asia, Buddha, wonderful. He said that when the drop reaches the ocean, it loses its identity. That's not the way the great, experienced third-generation Swamis that we heard see it. That ain't the way I heard it tell. That's not the way they tell it. They say when the drop reaches the ocean and realizes it becomes, realizes one with it, realizes it always was the ocean. That's why Vedanta speaks of fullness, the plenum, if you will, the Latin, and the Buddhist friends speak of the void. God is, of course, that's the whole thing, ain't he? No thing. So if we want to say God is nothing, oh boy, all right, this is an evening. What a summation. Okay, so the personal God is not the absolute. It is a phase or expression. As they say, Mother God, Father God. A lot of people say the Mother, Father God. I kind of like that modern view. Or it can be said to be the manifestation. Plotinus called it the emanation of the absolute expression through the force of nature, and that expression will last so long as the objects to which that expression is related will last. So if all the phenomenal world would vanish, there would be no more necessity of a creator or the personal God. Therefore, the monistic thinkers who are the sincere and earnest seekers after the absolute, capital A, do not stop in dualism. It's like a station on the subway. And my friends here in Vedanta, we want to go. We're going to the end of the line. We're not even going to the next to the last station, my friends, which is called heaven. Heaven, heaven. Everybody talking about heaven. We want to go to the end of the line and realize our oneness with God. They do not stop in dualism, do not stop in qualified non-dualism, but want to go deeper and still further and try to find out the absolute truth, capital T, which is beyond all changes and all relations. Now, my friends, I'm a trembling. It's like earthquake. We felt earthquakes right here in this room. We're living in L.A. here, after all, Southern California. I'm trembling. Sometimes it causes me to tremble, tremble, tremble. When the morning stars sang together. So our loving, fun-loving, wonderful, grounded, and yet highly spiritual, funny, humorous founding Swami would speak from the pulpit on Sunday. Not infrequently, he'd quote Nietzsche. Yeah, Nietzsche. Funny duck, Nietzsche. He's a two-sided coin if there ever was one. You don't want to get the backside. He quote, this was Nietzsche's quote, God is dead. Nietzsche. And then, Nietzsche is dead. God. God ain't dead. Don't tell me. Don't tell me. God ain't dead. Swami, you got to take it from here because I've trembled myself out of existence. I'm shoeless Joe Jackson now. My shoes. Oh, don't worry about it.
When they once discover this absolute truth, they find that it is the eternal consciousness, existence, and bliss. It is beyond all manifestations, and that idea is beautifully described in the Rig Veda. Before the beginning of the evolution, there was neither entity nor non-entity. Now, here we notice words, entity and non-entity. They are the two relative terms. If one exists, it preassumes the existence of the other, and therefore it would be a relative thing. So when they are describing the absolute, they must describe in paradoxes. That is, something which is neither this nor that, and yet it is the cause of both. There was neither entity nor non-entity, neither death nor birth, nor immortality. Immortality is also a term which is relative to death. So the absolute cannot be called immortal or mortal, because if you call it immortal, there must be something which is mortal, and you call it mortal, there would be, and if you call it immortal, there must be something which is mortal, and you call it mortal.
Then there would be something that would mean death. You see?
Okay, they didn't put a then in. Right, but in the absolute, there is only one existence which can be experienced only by the divine intuition. It is neither one nor many. It is there. In it, there is neither space nor anything that exists in space. And it is the one being and one reality, and yet it contains everything. It holds us all there. We cannot get away, and nothing can exist outside of it.
Do you see how we've come through these readings, these wonderful nights we've shared, as Swami predicted we would do? From dualism to non-dualism or qualified monism to the absolute. And I think we've done it in wonderful stages. Remember dreaming and dreamless sleep and the awakened state, and then the fourth, the spiritual experience of our reality with a capital R, that underlying foundation, which is what we really are all the time. Well, Swami, you just do whatever you want to with the rest of your evening. You got me all tingle. Yeah.
All these phenomena are nothing but dreams. They are like the waves in the eternal ocean of the non-dual Brahman. Individual souls are like so many bubbles. A bubble would rise on the surface of the ocean, meet other bubbles, remain together for a while, move on together for a while, and ultimately go down again into the ocean without losing its individuality, because its individuality depends upon the individuality of the ocean. So these individual souls are rising in that ocean of the absolute, like the bubbles or the waves. We think that they are our friends and relatives, but in truth, they are the cause of our bindings. So from the standpoint of the absolute, they are rather regarded as the delusive attachment or the delusion. In fact, each one of us is like a bubble in that eternal ocean of the absolute. Then why do we differentiate? Because we do not understand our relationship to the absolute ocean. But we understand the relation of the bubble to the ocean, or the relation of the wave to the ocean. Then we understand our relation to the absolute.
I'm sorry, Swami, but it's so wonderful to think of the butter on the bread and then the other part. But when we understand, right? When we understand the relation of the bubble to the ocean, or the relation of the wave to the ocean, then what?
Then we understand our relation to the absolute. In truth, we are living in the ocean of the infinite. Our existence is a part of the infinite existence, and our life force is a part of the infinite life force. Everything that belongs to us does not belong to us, as it belongs to the universe. We simply make mistakes and suffer on the account of our mistakes. A philosophy which is a true philosophy will help us in getting out of this dark abyss of ignorance and show us the light, so that we can live in this world without suffering and reaping the consequences of the works that we perform through ignorance and selfishness. Then we enjoy the life of true happiness, pleasure, joy, and peace in our hearts. If we cannot live in peace and knowledge, our life is not worth living.
Wow. Need a deep breath. Swami, is this what you've been leading us up to all these nights and days and so forth? This has been a lovely, he selected these passages. And I must say that this beloved Abhedananda, we have a few more disciples of the 16. We find expressions, Koko Maharaj, that's Abhedananda, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, Koko Maharaj. We're reading the case, Koko Maharaj entered the room or something. Or Koko Maharaj walked through the room. Few disciples we don't have a lot of content for, but we'll probably try to, through another book, they walked with the Master, they walked with God, whatever. But in a way, this is, my friends, very much like the crescendo, very much like the summation of the fellowship, the love, which was based on the fact that all of these 16 recognized who the other 15 were. They were his very self. They were one with the Absolute, and they knew it. So when Jesus says, and love thy neighbor as thyself, why? Because your neighbor is yourself. And that lovely phrase which has come to our mind recently, Easter was a couple of Sundays back, one more back if you're not Orthodox. Jesus said, a new commandment I give unto you, that you shall love one another even as I've loved you. That's all seeing the Absolute in each other. So frankly, this reading tonight and that sentence, very much like the crescendo which often goes with the finale in a great symphony or a great oratorio. And no less a friend of ours and a luminary than our beloved Swami now in New York, Swami Sarva Priyananda. He gave this wonderful talk leading up to and really starting, middle, and in Advaita Vedanta from the pulpit here in Hollywood. And at the end, some lady who was really with it said, almost like, but Swami, the but wasn't it? Swami, what about the cosmos? And by that she really meant the night sky, the universe, and when the morning stars sang together. And he really hit a 3-run home run out of the ballpark and surprised me. He said the universe is the great epic poem of God. So I have to thank the Swami for taking it this far. I think not only is this the part of the final chapter of this book, which was condensed, was it a bit into true psychology? Or is
No,
it
just collected.
Collected, good, because I said so to get my roommate. Hi, Sid. sent the roommate this wonderful book, and I hope it hadn't left anything out. Not only the summation of the book is coming with all these great phrases, but the summation of, I would like to think, Abhedananda's, how many volumes? 12 again? 11 volumes that he wrote during the 20 years that he was in America. But, my friends, it's the summation of Vedanta. I do feel like pointing out, like a message from our sponsor, that at the end of the day, and this is something that perhaps even some of the Vedanta folks have not thought through, I think, clearly. You're not going to get a different persuasion on the part of this Swami, that Swami. We call it in New Jersey, India, this, all the little centers. Understand? Amen. Coronavirus. It's possible that we got 2,000 Swamis in the world. In the world. That includes, what, 13 maybe in this country? Rough number? Well, I mean, there are quite a few, but maybe 13 centers with deep tooth.
More than that.
More than that, with a deep tooth root? Yeah, okay, but anyway, official, more than that. But maybe we got 2,000 and counting. Now I'm looking at my beloved brother over there, from Pasillo. Rio de Janeiro, where Christ stands like this on the mountain, overlooks the people. 1,500, I hear, of those boys have hit the streets in India during the coronavirus. So I want to ask you, who's minding the store? They ain't one of them. At the end of the day, that's going to come up with a different persuasion. Now, it's not that we're trying to persuade you. No. If anything, convince. Your own words in your reading will convince you if there's truth in this. And incidentally, all that truth they're talking about, that's the capital T, truth that Jesus said, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But we're not telling you what it is. We may say, well, this is my little bit of the truth. I got my little part of the cheese. But we'll leave it to you. All of these Swamis are Advaitists at the end of the day. Some of them come by this path, that path, the other path. But our also wonderfully loving Swami, we love him, Swami, who was our second Swami here, he had that knowledge. And he said, sure, all the Swamis say they think they're all Advaitists, meaning there is just reality, just infinity shining. It says in the Upanishads, I shining, this shining, all things shine. And some of us like to spin out the yarn a little bit longer. Like the wonderful wife in the American Revolution, saying, I'd sell, I'd sell my yarn, I'd sell my wheel, or as I sell this and that, I'd even sell my spinning wheel. Oh, I'd even sell my spinning wheel to buy my love a sword of steel. Johnny has gone for a soldier. All of these Swamis and Swaminis and all of the devotees and all of this cascade and shower of stars, talk about a meteor shower that have come to us from India to the West, they've all brought with it this sword of discrimination between the make-believe and the real. And by spinning out that yarn, different ones will talk about it this way, different ones will talk about it this way. Don't fool yourselves. And my brothers in India, please, give us a break. Be patient with us, the colonials in the Western world, like Hollywood, California. God isn't finished with us yet. Please do not make the mistake that there are such things in the Ramakrishna order as bhaktas and gyanis and karma yoginis and meditators. We are all at one level bhaktas, meaning as Shankar does to keep our mind on God all the time. The important thing is we are all gyanis. We are all Advaita Vedantists. The one is what we are trying to reach in our minds and our hearts. You do it your way and I'll do it mine. But in that bond of love, that bond of yearning, and the inspiration that each person, each woman and man and child around here, that angle of perception that they bring, is the song of God, the Bhagavad Gita, the great epic poem of the universe, of God. So Swami, if you got more for me, I'm here. Otherwise, I'm going to tune in next week. Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnamayasate, Purnamaya, Purnamadaya, Purnamevavashishata. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. With Brahman are the things we see. Filled Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman both all that is. From Brahman all, it is still the same. Peace, peace.